Defence ministers from Europe's 5 main military powers are meeting in Paris to discuss support to Ukraine and rearming Europe. The UK's Defence Minister John Healey is attending alongside his counterparts from France, Germany, Italy and Poland. Representatives from the EU and NATO are also there, so too the Ukrainian Defence Minister. It follows recent talks between the United States and Ukraine over a ceasefire deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Former British military intelligence officer Philip Ingram joins me now. The meeting today discussing a possible European peacekeeping force. What might that look like?
Well, it's far too early to work out what the structure will be. We don't have a peace agreement on the table, never mind in outline, never mind a finalised agreement to put troops against. So at the moment, what we're seeing are defence ministers getting together to try and work out who could be part of a coalition of the willing. We've got the UK and France have said they will step up and lead this. And the UK's got a history of leading these sorts of operations through its leadership of NATO headquarters with headquarters Allied Rapid Reaction Corps. We did this in Bosnia for the implementation of the Dayton Peace Agreement and, of course, in Kosovo. So this is something that we're well versed in.
And Sir Keir Starmer has already announced an increase in defence spending. That's up to 2.5% in 2027. A number of European powers are also upping theirs. Is it going to be enough? May we have to see more?
It's nowhere near enough. We should be at going to 2.5% today, with an aim for 3% by 2027, and planning for more if necessary. What is quite clear out of all of the tactics coming from Washington is that Donald Trump wants to get rid of his ties to provide security in Europe. There are 3 major conflicts around the world brewing. We've got Europe, Ukraine, Russia, we've got the Middle East, and we've got brewing in Southeast Asia. Donald Trump's least priority is the one in Europe, and he wants Europe to step up and take responsibility for that. We need an awful lot more money.
And part of that, potentially, is putting British troops into Ukraine. Is there a number at the moment that we can put in, that we can commit? And there's obviously a risk there, I guess, that they'll come into direct conflict with Russian forces.
Well, there's always a risk whenever you put troops on the ground, especially in the early stages of any peace agreement and you're implementing it. But we don't have the detail of what the peace agreement would be. So I think the current planning that is going on, and there will be a lot of planning in different military headquarters looking at a worst-case scenario, a best-case scenario, and then the more realistic something in the middle. And the noises that we're hearing are peacekeeping forces that are going to be up to, but not right up to the front line, so that they can police and provide that security throughout what are the relatively secure areas of Ukraine at the moment. And nobody has discussed what's going to happen in that immediate conflict zone on the front line, which of course is exceptionally dangerous given the amount of unexploded ordnance and mines and other battlefield detritus that'll be hanging around.
We've heard a lot from NATO, from EU leaders, Sir Keir Starmer, President Donald Trump. We haven't heard much about this peacekeeping idea from Putin. What do you think his response will be?
Well, I don't think we've heard much from Putin about anything. The latest statement that's come out from his team is that they're waiting for the Americans to formally deliver the outline of the ceasefire agreement and what was discussed with Zelensky in Saudi Arabia before they make their minds up. I think the Russians are worried because what has happened now, I think the Americans have been quite clever in this, is they have sat down and talked to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have proved that they're willing to negotiate towards peace. They've come up with the outline of something to try and get everyone on the same piece of paper. That's been put to the Russians. As everyone has said, commentating, the ball is now on the Russians' court to see whether they're going to come onto the same piece of paper and then start to continue the negotiations before you can start to then get into the detail of what any peace agreement would look like. So we have to see what the formal Russian response will be.
At the moment as well, US support can seem quite unpredictable. Obviously, we saw the fallout after Trump, Zelensky and Vance's meeting. What kind of support would a peacekeeping mission need from the US?
Certainly early days. The US would need to provide this backstop that our Prime Minister Keir Starmer keeps talking about. And that backstop is strategic lift, strategic air support in being able to move cargo and military materiel around, not necessarily into Ukraine, but certainly into Poland and other bordering countries. The intelligence support, that backstop of intelligence would be critical, because that would give early warnings that the Russians were planning to do anything. Until European intelligence can start to build up, but we're never going to get to the same level as the Americans. And the final bit of the backstop is, if all goes wrong and Russia turns around and attacks in, and we find that the European peacekeeping troops on the ground cannot hold them back, then it's an agreement that the Americans would come in and support from a military, a combat perspective, if necessary. I think that would be essential for any European peacekeeping force to go on the ground in the early days.
So essentially, as you see it, it wouldn't be possible without US air, naval support and intelligence sharing operations.
It would be very, very difficult indeed. And nothing is impossible, but it's the amount of risk that you're willing to take politically, and that risk translates into the potential risk on the lives of our men and women that are on the front line.
Talking of risk, I mean, these talks are in the name of peacekeeping, but there are concerns that actually it could spread into a wider conflict. British troops, French troops come under fire. There's a bigger conflagration. Is that something you're concerned about? Is that something European powers, Zelensky, Trump are talking about?
It's something you're always concerned about. Every time you plan a peacekeeping operation, you look at what are the options for peace enforcement. So should someone break it, how do you then deal with that? And how do you deal with that with minimizing the escalation that will come with it? So it is always a concern, and that will dictate the force package that you put in. So the level of protection that you need in the troops, the armored vehicles, the types of armored vehicles, the types of artillery and rocket systems you'll put in, the air defenses that you need, the air cover that you need. All of this will be planned in minute detail. And there will be outline plans at the moment in our permanent joint headquarters in Northwood and the equivalents in our European capitals.
And just to finish, you personally, do you think this is a positive step or a negative step or just a step?
Anything that brings peace, that stops the huge numbers of casualties on the front line in Ukraine, is a positive step. It could turn very negative if Ukraine is, in the long term, forced to physically hand over and sign over its territory, because that would send a very bad message to other global leaders who've got territorial ambitions, and in particular Xi Jinping when it comes to Taiwan. He may take any outcome from any peace agreement here and take that as an indicator as to how he would be treated should he take Taiwan by force. So the Americans are playing with fire here.
Philip Ingram, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.